Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's 30 Minutes program. I'm honored to have the juvenile judge of Weakley County, Judge Jim Bradberry, here with us, and also Keith Jones, who works closely with the court system. And we're going to talk about some of the things that deal with juveniles. As we get closer to starting school back, there's a lot of things that parents need to know, but more importantly, the school system has to be able to make sure that children are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And first off, Your Honor, let me just simply say I'm glad to have you in the studio. It's been a long time since we've had you in the studio here to talk about the juvenile justice system.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Paul.
You know, I asked you this many years ago. How did you come to be the juvenile court judge more than 44 years ago? Is that right?
That's correct. Well, I had been practicing law for about 4 months when the legislature said to the juvenile court judge, who was our county mayor at that time, he held the position of juvenile court judge, they said, you cannot sentence anyone to state custody unless you have a law degree. Well, the mayor did not have a law degree, and he said, you have ruined my efforts in court by taking away this punishment, and therefore I am stepping down. And at that time, the county board said to the group of lawyers, get together and pick one of you to be the juvenile court judge. And we all sat down and discussed the matter, and someone said, well, the one with the most gray hair is Jim Bradberry. And the vote went down, and it was, I don't remember how many now, to 0 that I was appointed as the juvenile court judge. That occurred in February of 1980, and I've been the juvenile court judge ever since. I was elected in 1982. I had ran against Chancellor Malone at that time.
And he wasn't the chancellor. He was
No.
an attorney, and he later had become the chancellor of Weakley County and
That's
Circuit
correct.
Court, Weakley County and Obion County. You know, this is really interesting. By the way, so that our listeners know today that you are visually impaired or blind and have been for a long time. Was that before you became a lawyer or after?
That was before. I was in a hunting accident. I was Michigan, and I came down to visit my parents who had just moved back from Michigan, and we were back doing some construction work there at the house, and my cousin came by and said, well, let's go hunting for a while. And we went out, and his nephew was hunting with a young man about 15 years old, and a bird came up. He just got very excited and pulled the trigger too quickly, and it hit me right in the face. I think it was about a year and a half after that happened on New Year's Eve in 1974 that I started to Cooley Law School in Lansing, Michigan.
When did you get your degree?
And I got my degree in 1979.
How hard was that for a man who doesn't have vision?
Well, as I recall back, Paul, quite frankly, it wasn't all that difficult. I had somebody reading to me, and my son at that time was 14, and he did a lot of work and helped me out a great deal. When I had to take a test there in the school, a reader came in and read to me, and then I dictated the answer, and it really wasn't that difficult.
You know, that's an amazing story that you tell, and I'm sure you've shared it in church groups and others who sometimes you don't realize what you have until you don't have it anymore. And for a number of years, you've been practicing law. How many years is it now that you've been practicing?
44, be 45 next August.
Mm-hmm. I must ask you, being able to be an attorney, when a client would come in to see you, or in juvenile court for coming to seeing you and didn't know that they had hired a lawyer who couldn't see them, but you seem to be so good at what you do because you've been doing it for so many years.
Well, that's true. I've never really had a client come in for the first time and that he knew that I was blind and didn't say anything about it. The only one that's ever said anything about it was a young man about 12 or 13 years old. He was sitting there with his father one day, and he said, they told me you were blind. And I said, yes, that's correct. He said, what do you wear them glasses for then? That's the only one I think ever questioned.
Well, I will say this, and I've never said this before about you, and we've known each other for a long time. You're a handsome man. You dress well. You're very articulate, and you have everything that you could possibly want to have. And now, of course, for all these years, you don't have to worry about your vision. You know what you can and can't do. I'm going to go back here for just a couple of moments on one thing that was pretty interesting. And you are in the courtroom once a week, I guess, whatever.
That's correct.
And you are talking to young people who are in trouble, juveniles. Do they know? How do you know? I mean, this is where I guess your ears, your whatever the sense is that you have, but you seem to know exactly what's going on in the courtroom, even though you can't see the accused.
Well, if I don't know, and I should know, Keith Jones comes up and tells me, because I had this young man coming in one morning, and Keith came up and said, Judge, he's got on a long raincoat with a pet monkey tied around his neck and some other garb that he had on. And when he came up before me, I said, young man, before I take your case on, go out and change your clothes. Of course, they were astounded that I knew that, but Keith had told me that before. So,
Keith, what is your role in juvenile court? I'm going to come back to you, Judge, but what is your role there?
Let's do what the judge says. Whatever he needs, if I've got information that he needs to know, we tell it, I tell it. But, I remember the monkey story, and it's a first for me.
What's it like watching Judge Bradberry in the courtroom? What is it like?
Oh, there's really no difference. I mean, I don't know how to do it any other way. I've got his back and he's got mine. And
you have chemistry. There is a chemistry between the two of you. How long have you been with the judge?
We were just talking about that. I think 40 years now, except for a little period of time when I took a sabbatical, but I left in 92 and came back in 98. Mm-hmm. But even during that time, we still talked every week or so, and it just.
Well, I think Paul, that when I interviewed him, I think he was 22, right around there, and he came in and I had interviewed several others. In fact, I had kind of mentally picked someone else. And when Keith left, I said, that's the one I want. And I called him up and told him that he had the job. Mm-hmm. And he worked for me for quite a while. Then he took a hiatus and went to Alabama for a while, and he came back, and fortunately I had a vacancy, and he went right back to work.
The thing that we talk about court, you have seen so many kids to come in, and I know from talking to you in the past that your goal is to see that they don't ever come back again, and yet at the same time they still keep coming back. The recidivism is a little bit out of whack right here.
That's very true. You hope that you can administer some punishment that will prevent that, but it's just impossible, and it is more the fault of the family than it is the young person.
I was looking over some of the notes in preparation, but one of the things that always seems to be different is that the state legislature will bring something on new, because the state legislature had to bring something on new because we've got new things that juveniles are doing. And, we've had shootings, we've had guns in schools, we've got there's just a ton of things that the legislature has had to wrap their arms around, new laws, not intentionally wanting to. Keith, would you kind of share with some of the things that we're dealing with right now?
I think since the COVID years, they're getting younger. They're getting the older kids don't seem to be getting into as much trouble, but the younger ones are having the 6 to 12-year-olds. They don't have any social skills at times, and so that's the big issue right now. They stay on telephones and videos, and they play games. And when they get into that World Wide Web, you never know when they're going to be talking to someone, playing a game with someone across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. We have been fortunate in Weakley County that we haven't had shootings that have had to come in front of you or the next step up. But is there a certain style of where you can say, we know we're going to have some problems with that child? We know from what you've learned in school or maybe in the neighborhood and so forth. And the next thing you know, they end up in your courtroom, Your Honor.
Well, we try to fashion the punishment so that we can deal with them over the years as it passes by. And hopefully we can prevent a lot of this happening when we see them starting to divest or digress from the sentence that they got originally. We've done that a lot by putting things on their ankle bracelets, so we can keep up with them. And if we see them starting to digress from what they should be doing, then we can step in and take some steps to hopefully prevent them from going any further.
Do most of the kids, either of you can take this, but it seems as though most of the kids that come in front of a juvenile court judge is because there's not a father in the room, split homes, these kinds of things. Would you say that to be true, most of the kids that are coming?
I would say that to be true, yes. And that's one of the problems we've got is the one-parent family, that the young people do not react as well as they do, and it's both parents are there.
Keith?
It seems to be a bigger problem with grandparents having to take their grandchildren in. Mom and dad wind up getting hooked on meth or whatever, and grandparents have custody and trying to raise their grandchildren. And
I want to just jump in here for a couple of seconds. If you've just joined us, Juvenile Judge Jim Bradberry, Weakley County, Keith Jones, his assistant, with us. Let me just run some of these new laws, and I just want to know what is the future here. Blended sentence for 16 and older children. Here's another one. Blended sentence in regard to the children who are not just 16, but they're really kind of adults in many cases. Would you agree with that, Your Honor?
That's true. And I think they're trying to be able to deal with the seriousness of the offense, such as murder, and trying to get them directed not only to try to straighten them up, but to punish them. And that's where that 16 blended sentence comes in.
Well, you have bullying, and then you have cyberbullying. We're talking about, Facebook or TikTok or whatever.
Snapchat and all that stuff. One thing, the 16-year-old on the sentences, first degree, second degree murder, I'm understanding that there is going to be, when this law goes into effect, a jury trial. And with that, we still don't know all of the details on it. I know the judge is going to a conference in August that he'll learn more about what's happening. But a jury trial for a first degree, second degree murder, that's interesting, and it is unusual.
Well, you just brought up Rusty Grill's and Brent Taylor's legislation, a child to be tried as an adult who commits offense of organized retail crime or theft of a firearm. I mean, these are the things that you're supposed to know not to steal and not to pull a firearm, and yet at the same time. And the firearm goes back, Your Honor, probably, I don't know if you had firearms back then or not, but somewhere around that there were some crazy things going on. But this is really serious. I mean, rushing out a whole bunch of kids to go outside and because of a firearm, but at the same time, you're talking about stealing, big-time stealing, too.
Yeah, I've not really had a lot of cases that would involve a firearm. I would say very few cases that have, but they're maybe coming to us because they're happening so much in the rest of the world that one day it's going to hit here, and that's why they're trying to deal with it, I think, at this point.
I think that there's been about 5 cases that involved firearms in this last fiscal year, and so one incident, but 4 or 5 that have had them own them.
You know, the thing that I've read on the news here, about every 6 months, we find that a baby has been hurt by their mother or father, or maybe both of them for that fact. And here you have teenagers that have brought a baby into this world, and they've dropped the baby, or they've, left the baby in a room full of drugs and all of these kinds of things. I don't know how you deal with that emotionally, Your Honor.
Well, it's very difficult, but we try to deal with it to prevent it from happening in the future. Not so much to punish them, but to straighten them out. And hopefully we can address that problem, and it will not keep multiplying itself.
You know what I hear about so much, and I think it's out there quite a bit, and we're talking about sex offenders. I mean, taking, and this is, I guess, Your Honor, this is where parents have to be aware of what's going on with their children. And we got the Carl Perkins Center here right down the road from the radio station, and they're constantly dealing with these kinds of problems that are going on. And I'll let you jump in on that.
Well, I would not like to deal with those kind of problems personally, but sitting there, and if it comes before me, then I will have to deal with it and try to fashion something that will prevent it from happening in the future. It's a very sad set of circumstances that exists.
We're fortunate to have some of the best trained law enforcement people who, Robbie Hatler at the DA's office, he's the best that I know of. And all of the other officers. DCS would not want to do their job at all because they see it firsthand doing their investigation. And they also file the removals that come in front of the judge, and they have to present that testimony. The Carl Perkins Center that do the forensic interviews, all the partners, youth villages, the Camelot, all of them, they work together under the judge's direction so that he can order whatever they need, and then they are required to do whatever is in that order, and they come back and report. And I think that's what makes us unique and successful, is because we've got a good team.
Yeah. Judge Jim Bradberry with us today, along with Keith Jones, whom you just heard. Your Honor, have you ever gotten emotional on a case? Have you ever gotten to the point where it really got next to you?
Yes, but for me to tell you exactly what it was, I would have to think for a minute. But yes, I have remembered that tears did come to my eyes.
Keith, you've got a dozen stories, I know, things because your heart it pounds a lot harder.
Yeah, he deals with them so personally.
I think just a couple of weeks ago I got kind of emotional. I had to get that away. But sometimes when they walk back down the hallway and towards my office, and they're 25 years old and they've turned themselves around and they know what went wrong and they went right. And that's what makes it the joy come.
I'm guessing that from time to time, by the way, every juvenile, do they have a lawyer when they come into the court?
No. They can ask to be appointed an attorney, and they will be appointed.
Is a juvenile still considered at 18, or is it now 16? Where are we? Are we always going to be just
18?
17 in 364 days.
Yeah.
Do you have some that have come into your court that you've said this kid needs to be somewhere else, upstairs, maybe at General Sessions?
Well, I have to address a matter that appeared before me one time. This young fella came in, and he had been charged at that time. I'm trying to remember what he had been charged with. He had been into it with somebody, and I told him that he had the right to have an attorney with him, and he said, lawyers, lawyers, lawyers. all they want is your money. I think it's time for me to stand up and speak for myself. I said, well, what do you have to say? He said, nothing. And the sad part of that, Paul, is that he later went to prison and spent a number of years in prison and may still be in it today.
So we're at a point right now where the juvenile system, it's still kind of changing. Would you agree with that? Because it appears to have changed a lot over the last 25, 30 years.
It has changed a lot because of the expansion of adulthood. It goes from 18 to 14 to 12 because the age of the children are getting less and less that are coming into the court. And that is disturbing, and I, again, fashion that back to one-parent families, or, as Keith pointed out a while ago, grandparents raising their children. That's what I think is fashioning the experience that we're getting to at this point in time.
You know, 50%, approximately 50% of young people who marry are going to get a divorce. And they're in maybe because they're too young, or maybe they just wanted to live and see if they could practice the marriage, see if it's going to work, and then get married, and then they ended up finding out it's not going to work. Yeah. I know you're a man of God, Judge Bradberry, and I know that you are in church regularly. What can you say outside of being on the bench to help these people along the way?
Well, there's one thing for sure, Paul. If you put the Lord first in your life, you're going to lessen your problems in life a great deal. And I think that is one of the things that is happening and has been for a long time, that parents are letting their children be raised outside of a church environment. And I think that is a negative thing, and we're experiencing the difficulties with it.
I know.
And with the, as Keith pointed out a while ago, the things that children now can have to communicate with one another is also causing a great deal of problems, I think.
Whose problem is it? Is it society's problem? Is it the parents' problem? Is it the kids who think they're old enough to make decisions? Is it their problem?
Well, it's the parents' problem first. If they take the necessary steps that should be taken, a lot of these things would not happen. But when they don't, it's the parents. And then it ascends to the courts and society, and it's sad.
When a juvenile comes into court, do their mother and father usually come, or is it one or the other?
Well, very rarely is it both parents, but one parent usually is with the young person.
When a bad boy or a bad girl gets into trouble, and in serious trouble, where do you send them?
Well, there's a number of places that we can use to send them. DCS, if they're sent to DCS, and then DCS will make the decision as to where to put this child.
Do they learn when they go to DCS, Department of Children's Services?
I'm going to let Keith answer. He's a little more involved in that.
I would say that for a kid who goes to DCS custody, that if we send them away, they come back, and they come back with different tricks. Mm-hmm. When we try our best to do placement first with some non-custodial placements, like Compass, like Parkwood Hospital, like Perimeter in Jackson, to get their needs met so that we can get them home and they don't have to go through all that other, we can supervise them. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think that I'm most proud of the judge is he hears a lot of different cases. He hears delinquent cases. He hears unruly cases. He hears DCS cases. He hears child support cases. And that's just, I've always been amazed at how he could keep all of those cases separate. But he does a good job, but there's so much out there that needs to be found out.
Is the juvenile judge nowadays a full-time job? Can you do it in 1 or 2 days?
Oh, yes. It can be handled in that period of time without any difficulty.
Certainly, it takes a toll on you when you keep hearing, and some of the cases I'm sure you've heard 100 times of 100 different people, maybe even more than that. Has there ever been anything showing up or shown up that said, well, this is a first?
Well,
I don't know if I'm going to make you grin or not, but
let me talk about something. It's the first. I was sitting in circuit court one day with Wanda, who was my secretary at that time, and she said to me, I just was handed a letter by this young girl, and I said, okay, read it to me. And it was one that had appeared before me sometime before, and she was thanking me in the letter for helping her out. Well, several years later, my dad, who was almost 100 years old, was put in the Weakley County Nursing Home. And I was sitting there talking to him, and in the door came this young woman who said, Mr. Bradberry, or Judge, I was in your court, and I finally said, is this the letter that I got from you? And she said, yes. And she said, you don't have to worry about your father here. I will take care of him. I'm the nurse on this floor. And I said, great. And she did do that. Well, about a year after that, or two, I don't remember how many it was now, I got a knock on my front door once. And I went to the door, and it was her. And she said, I just wanted to talk to you for a minute. I am now in Nashville, and I'm working as a nurse there in Nashville, and things are going very well. And I thank you for what you did for me, and I want to take a picture with you. So Wanda and I went out to the swing, and she got in the middle, and we took a picture of her. Now, this has been 30 years ago. I just talked with her about a week ago. That story makes my career.
I'm going to wrap up by asking you maybe a question you've thought about, and maybe you thought about this coming over here. How long do you want to keep being the juvenile judge? That's probably the first question. How long are you going to be doing this? You've heard that before. Most people retire at 70, and you are now 88 plus some change. Is that right?
That's correct.
And nobody would have known that publicly probably until we just shared that out with you.
Right.
You are remarkable. I don't know how else to say it, and I hope you don't mind me over killing it a little bit, but as long as I have known you, the professionalism that you've maintained in your integrity, the second thing is your articulation still on spot, and you keep up with the law, and you keep trying to help make people, make young people become better citizens.
I hope I can do good, because I have to say that's what the Lord put.
So have you got a doomsday plan where you're getting ready to say 2 more years, 4 more years? I'm going to run for a second.
It's getting close, Paul. It's getting close.
Do you have a date? Do you have a plan for the end of the year? Or?
Well, I'll be 45 years in it in February of next year, and I will be 79 years old.
I don't think it's 79. I think it might be.
89. I'm sorry. 89. Now people ask me, how old are you? And I said, 16. They said, 16. I said, yeah, 8 and 8, 16, isn't it?
Let me finish up by just simply saying thank you for joining us today to talk about the juvenile system, some things that maybe that they would love to be able to have you to come talk to them, talk to their children, or maybe, and hopefully you'll be able to have that same opportunity to have more children to come back as adults and to be able to say thank you for helping turn my life around. Keith, you get a last word.
Oh, I just appreciate being able to work for a good man, and I appreciate all of the support that we have in our community from individuals, also law enforcement. I can't go without bragging on law enforcement because they are out there in the midst of all of it. And so the people that work with us, the people that volunteer with us, the youth villages, all those others that carry counseling center pathways that we couldn't function without.
Thanks so much, Keith. Keith Jones, everybody. He's with the juvenile system here in Weakley County. And, of course, the juvenile judge of Weakley County, Judge Jim Bradberry. Your Honor, thank you for sharing some time with us today, talking about some of the things that people need to know about, but more importantly, to be able to give people the encouragement they need, raising children or maybe talking to a child and giving them one more chance. I know you've done that before, and I also know that you're very compassionate, but you're firm and you're stern, but you want.
Thank you, Paul, for inviting us over, and it has been a pleasure.
Thank you. That's our program today here on our 30 Minutes program. This is Paul Tinkle, pre-recorded.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.